of you crying. Brother, 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 there's far too many of you dying.
One of the most impassioned voices to emerge was George Jackson's. His published letters from prison had reached a wide audience. On August 21st, 1971, Jackson was shot to death in San Quentin Prison in California. At Attica, the news of his death greatly affected the inmates.
When it really hit me, it's going to breakfast that morning. Everybody was quiet. Nobody wasn't picking up no silverware. You know, when you go in the dining room in the mess hall, you had to pick up a knife, spoon, and fork. And when you come out, you had to have that. Nobody was picking up. Nobody was talking.
I don't know that I can describe in words how it affected me because George was, in effect, my mentor. I remember his going to court in shackles, and the brother would stand erect, you know, proud black man that he was. And they had not broken his spirit. And these are the things that Dr. King and Malcolm talked about, the breaking down of the black man's spirit.
3 weeks later, a fight between inmates and guards at Attica sparked a prison-wide uprising. Violence swept through the institution.
An estimated 1,000 prisoners took over 4 cell blocks of Attica State Prison about 9:30 this morning.
The general chaos was such that even I was taken aback because you had 40 or 50 correction officers who no longer, it appeared, had control of the institution. So order had to be made out of this disorder. And at that point, the Muslim contingent in the yard, I think there were 35 Muslim brothers, saw to it that there was no further injuries to the hostages.
The newly established inmate leadership released 11 injured guards, but still held hostage 39 prison employees. Commissioner of Corrections Russell Oswald agreed to negotiate. Accompanied by advisors and a local television crew, he entered the yard where 1,200 inmates were in control.
Take it as we walk. Take it as you walk. Take it as you walk. Take it. Make sure you get that roof over there. Take it as you walk.
The news team was permitted to talk to the hostages.
Been treated all right?
Yes, I have so far. Been treated very good.
No complaints, but no problem.
The meeting with Commissioner Oswald quickly focused on inmate fear of reprisals for the rebellion.
The fact now that the sheriff's department, the various counties, and the state troopers has taken over because it has been declared now a state of emergency. You couldn't guarantee no reprisal anyway. This is now out of your hands, isn't it, Commissioner?
No, it is not.
You still control the state troopers?
Absolutely.
All right, now, you want to put your no reprisals in writing?
Yes.
Would you start doing that?
I talked as rationally as I could with them and listened to them for some period of time. And ultimately, they said they had an agenda of what they wanted. And I said, well, give me the agenda.
The agenda included demands for improved conditions. The inmates called for educational programs, an end to censorship of letters and magazines, adequate health care, and hiring of black and Spanish-speaking guards. Distrustful of state officials, the inmates also asked for outsiders to observe negotiations.
Arthur Eve of Buffalo, the Prison Solidarity Committee of New York, Minister Farrakhan from the Muslims. We want Huey P. Newton from the Black Panther Party, and we want the chairman of the Young Lords
In
Party.
all, the inmates requested 13 observers.
Wait until you get the cue. Come on, it's on now. All of us here realize that wherever there's struggle, there's sacrifice.
The next morning, Commissioner Oswald returned to the yard, still seeking a negotiated solution to the crisis.
I talked with the governor's legal counsel yesterday, and he told me the same as Mr. Schwartz told me, and that is that the governor nor no one else has the power to grant amnesty for the commission of a crime, and that's the falls within the purview of the local law enforcement authorities.
Mr. Oswald, now, you and I know that that's a lie.
The talks had reached an impasse. Tensions in the yard increased.
We have been asking for over 29 hours for food and water. We haven't got none. We're going to keep Mr. Russell G. Oswald here until we get the food and the water.
tractor, the food is brought into this yard.
Protected by the inmate security force, Commissioner Oswald left the yard. The hopes of both sides now rested on the outside observers who arrived in Attica later that day.
We were led down a long corridor which had been trashed and burned out in the initial rioting. I mean, the first feeling of shock, I think, for sort of a sedentary middle-class person like me was the feeling of being out of reach of the law that one ordinarily thinks protects you, you know, that sort of protection we all take for granted until you don't have it. And all of a sudden I realized that there wasn't anything in there to protect me except these other inmates, whom it's all too easy to think of, you know, as murderers and thieves and so forth. And that is a somewhat scary feeling, there's no question. But very shortly after that, we all got down to business of trying to, you know, work out the problems there. The inmate leaders got into some very fervid oratory. They were great orators.
We are men. We are not beasts, and we do not intend to be driven or beaten as such. The entire prison populace has set forth to change forever the ruthless brutalization and disregard for the lives of the prisoners here and throughout the United States. What has happened here is but the sound before the fury of those who are oppressed.
The moment I saw him speak on television, I said to myself, Elliot, what have you done? What are you doing? Because I felt that they would make him pay for that, and pay dearly.
The first meeting of observers and inmates lasted almost till dawn. A public address system set up in the yard kept the 1,200 inmates informed. On Saturday, the third day of the uprising, troopers surrounding the prison yard waited for a decision by the state. Using a video camera, they recorded the activities of the inmates.
And there is the ugliest, blackest Negro gentleman I've ever seen in my life in that black outfit. Boy, when they painted him dark.
The man doing the speaking is wearing a bright red robe. He's just gotten several very loud responses from the crowd. Typical rabble-rouser type talk.
It was a good feeling, you know, and especially after we start dealing and start organizing and start talking about the conditions and start talking about why we were out there and start talking about the grievances and start talking about why we were rebelling and why rebellion was necessary, the feeling became more and more into me. And I start feeling a part of it more.
Ain't nothing dead about us. We ain't gonna die. Nothing. We will not die in here.
It was almost a community within a community. And it was somewhat very, very impressive that they had said, this is our home and we're now going to make it as livable as possible. And there was a tremendous amount of discipline there within the yard.
Families and friends of the hostages gathered outside the prison walls, waiting for news. Relatives and supporters of the inmates demonstrated nearby. That evening, the mood in the yard changed. William Quinn, a guard hurt in the initial takeover, had died in the hospital. Governor Nelson Rockefeller and Commissioner Oswald had earlier agreed to most of the demands concerning prison conditions, but rebelling inmates could now face murder charges unless amnesty was granted. The next day, state troopers moved into position to retake the prison, if ordered.
Time is 1:55 p.m. We're on the roof of C Block, looking at a detail of 270 marksmen with instructions to clear the catwalks upon command.
We thought that the situation had reached crisis, that in fact there was about to be an attempt to retake the prison. We thought that there would be a lot of bloodshed. In fact, we said to the governor that if that happened, there would be a massacre. And his response was that basically that he sympathized with our position. He felt that everything had been done that could be done. He was very, anyone who remembers Governor Rockefeller will remember his effusive manner. And he was very, thanked us greatly for our efforts and that sort of thing. But the net effect of it was that he felt everything had been done that could be done. He could not grant amnesty, and in fact said that even if I could, I wouldn't do it.
With negotiations deadlocked, inmates requested black and Latino reporters and a member of the establishment press. It was an attempt to speak directly to the public.
Y'all dudes running around here shooting that dope. Running around here shooting that dope. Getting high, raping them sisters, them white folks, and justifying it in the cause of revolution. Well, we're gonna die here at Attica, today or tomorrow. And we ask you to get together, get our people together, and unite.
The people in here are treated like dogs. Not only the black, the Puerto Rican, and the white. And we're going to get what we demand, or we're going to die trying.
Yes, and I want you brothers to get together because we together here. And these people think we shucking and jiving, but we is for real. All these dogs up there with all those rifles are trying to kill us. But we ain't gonna quit. You know why we're not gonna quit? Because we're one. We're one unit. We're tired of being beaten. We're tired of being oppressed. We're gonna get this if we all have to die. All of us. We all ready to die. Order down orders.
The hostages appealed to the state not to come in, not to kill, that the inmates' requests were right on that last day we were there. I mean, it was a very emotional kind of exchange from the hostages and from everyone.
I just hope that the commissioner and the other people in the committee that they've gathered together can come up with a solution to solve these people's problems and ours.
I'll tell you what I got to say. We've stood out here since Thursday, and my son is in there. Michael Smith is one of the hostages. I've talked to several of the other people here that have husbands in there, and some of the fathers. And I can't speak for all of them, but my feelings are this. You can only pacify a kid with a pacifier so long. At 3 o'clock this afternoon, we was led to believe that there was going to be a definite decision. They was going to bring them out. Now, damn it, I'll do it.
Monday morning, day 5. Commissioner Oswald demanded the immediate release of the hostages. In response, the inmates positioned 8 of the hostages on the catwalk. By their side stood inmates armed with knives and clubs, threatening to kill the hostages in case of an attack.
I was led blindfolded to the top of the catwalk, and I can recall when that helicopter flew overhead, besides being able to hear it, you could actually feel the concussion of the propellers from the helicopter overhead.
We knew that they were going to come in, but we never knew that they were going to come in there that way. That was really a big surprise, the way that they came in the yard. We thought they were going to come in there and knock some heads and bust some heads open and that kind of way. And once we start seeing the helicopters and they start shooting the gas pellets and I start seeing people getting opened up with shotguns, you know, then I knew that they were really coming in there in a violent, violent way.
Counselor has said that people are dying in there, and I agree with that. I think that there are people that are dying in there, and the scene is I'm going to cut this off. Helicopters are still flying overhead. It seems there was an announcement from the helicopter right above me to the inmates below that they should put their hands on their heads and come out. I don't know whether anyone has died inside. But I'm upset. This is unfortunate what has happened here. Whatever happens, after the situation here at Attica, a penal system here in the United States and the people who are kept inside of them will never be the same.
As the inmates surrendered, they were herded into an adjacent yard.
We were made to strip, lay in the mud, face down, and crawl to a guard 10 to 20 feet away from the guard that had you stripped. At that point, that guard would mark an X with white chalk on the back of select inmates, who were then removed from the mud physically by 2 additional guards, placed in a line to run a gauntlet of correction officers to be beaten all the way to another cell block.
You know, you gotta let me explain it this way. You know, it was very, very barbaric, you know, very, very cruel, you know, and I really feel it. You know, what they really did, you know, they ripped our clothes off, and they made us crawl on the ground like we were animals, you know, and they snatched me and they laid me on the table, you know, and they beat me in my testicles, and they burned me with cigarettes, and they dropped hot shells on me, and they put a football up under my throat, and they kept telling me that if it dropped, they was gonna kill me. And I really felt, you know, after seeing so many people shot, for no apparent reason, that we really were gonna do this.
Armed rebellion of the type we have faced threatens the destruction of our free society. We cannot permit that destruction to happen. It has indeed been an agonizing decision.
We had predicted the day before that it was going to be a massacre. Herman Badillo turned to me and said, I don't know what the hurry was. He said, there's always time to die. And I don't know what the hurry was either. You know, those guys weren't going anywhere. They were inside 30-foot walls. It was September. It was getting cold up there. The food was running out. The sanitary conditions were bad. The place smelled awful. I mean, that sense of freedom that the guys had had to begin with, but just before being out of their cells, that was beginning to wear away in the reality of their situation. I don't know what the hurry was. They could have waited 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. Those guys would have given up. They didn't have to go in and kill them all. But they did.
39 men were killed in the assault, 29 inmates and 10 hostages. Among the dead, inmate leader Elliot Barkley. 89 men were seriously wounded. Hostage Michael Smith was shot 4 times in the abdomen. 3 inmates were found stabbed to death, killed earlier by other prisoners. Initial reports by state officials that the hostages had died of slashed throats were refuted by the medical examiner.
The first 8 autopsies were on the cases identified to us as hostages. All 8 cases died of gunshot wounds.
The medical examiner's finding was significant. The inmates had no firearms. Gunfire by state troopers and prison guards was responsible for all the deaths during the retaking of the prison.
What did you do during those moments when the assault was actually taking place, the order had been given?
Well, I kept in touch by phone, and I'll never forget the moment when the report was given that 14 guards had come out alive, and while I was on the phone with Bobby Douglas, he said, now it's 15, now it's 16, now it's 17. He said, now 18, and we went up to 21. And I want to tell you, I just was absolutely overwhelmed. I just didn't see how it was possible with 1,200 men in there, armed with electrified barricades, with trenches, with a pledge, which they said that they would all go right down fighting to the last man, how it was going to be possible.
What does this tell you about the prisoners, Governor?
Pardon me?
What does this tell you about the prisoners, the fact that so many men did emerge unharmed?
You talking now about, well, I think what it tells is that the use of this gas is a fantastic instrument in a situation
Governor,
like
after
this.
that order had been given, did you pray?
Not after it. I prayed before.
In towns near Attica, people gathered to mourn the dead hostages. In the cities, families and friends carried the bodies of the dead inmates to their graves. In a country troubled by unrest, the call for law and order remained popular. But many wondered, was the nation well served by law enforcement used to silence voices of dissent? And was America willing to maintain order, no matter what the cost?
Mother, mother, there's too many of you crying. Brother, 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 there's far too many of you dying.